I was kicked out of the house on Thanksgiving Eve. On the way, I found a stranded family. I towed their car for free. The man shook my hand, but when we arrived at his house, I froze in shock, realizing he was a millionaire. He gave me an invitation that still makes me shiver. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Arthur, but most people just call me Art. I'm 61 years old. Yesterday was supposed to be about turkey and family gatherings. Instead, I found myself staring down at a single scuffed-up suitcase, trying to pack the remnants of my life, while my son, Kevin, watched from the doorway. His arms were crossed, his expression unreadable, making me feel like a common burglar. "You have to understand, Dad," he started, his voice flat and detached. "Brenda and I have been talking, and we've decided this arrangement just isn't working for us anymore." I paused, my hands still on an old work shirt, and looked up at the young man I had raised. This was the boy I'd taught to cast a fishing line, the one I'd helped with his science fair projects, the kid I'd cheered for at every single track meet. The man standing there now was a stranger wearing my son's face. "What arrangement?" I asked, but a cold dread was already pooling in my gut. I knew exactly what was coming. Brenda materialized behind him, placing her perfectly manicured hand on his shoulder, as if staking a claim. She had been orchestrating this for months. I'd seen it in the subtle ways she'd bring up the rising cost of utilities, the grocery bills, or how crowded the house felt with 3 adults. "The arrangement where you live here without contributing while we shoulder all the expenses," she said, her voice a syrupy sweet poison. "Kevin and I are trying to build our future, and frankly, we need our space. We need our privacy." I had been under their roof for 9 months, ever since the construction company I'd worked for downsized and let me go. At 61, finding a new foreman position was proving impossible. No one wanted to hire an older guy with a bad back and hands that trembled slightly after a long day. I'd given them what I could from my dwindling savings, bought groceries when I could, fixed their leaky faucet, patched the drywall, shoveled the driveway after every snowstorm. I truly thought I was earning my keep. "I've been looking for work," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You know I have." Kevin's jaw clenched. "For 9 months, Dad. That's 9 months of us waiting. They aren't excuses, son. It's hard out there for someone my age." "It's hard for everyone," Brenda cut in sharply, "but the rest of us don't get the luxury of just giving up." The words struck me like a physical blow. Giving up. I'd spent 40 years in construction, breaking my body to give Kevin a good life after his mother walked out on us when he was just 10. I'd given up holidays, new trucks, my own simple dreams so that he could have everything he needed. And now, at my lowest point, I was being accused of giving up. "I see," I said, my voice hollow. For a fleeting second, I saw a flicker of the boy I loved in Kevin's eyes as he shifted uncomfortably. But Brenda just squeezed his shoulder, and the flicker was gone, extinguished. "We went ahead and cleared out the guest room," she announced. "Your things are packed and ready." They had gone through my personal belongings while I was out filling out job applications. The violation of that felt somehow worse than being thrown out. I walked numbly to the guest room. My entire 61 years had been condensed into one suitcase and a couple of cardboard boxes. 35 years of marriage to Kevin's mother. 21 years of raising a boy on my own. It all fit into 3 containers. I lifted the suitcase. It felt heavier than it should have, not from its contents, but from the weight of what it symbolized, the end of everything I thought I knew about family and loyalty. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, the question hanging in the sterile air. "You'll figure something out," Kevin said, finally unable to meet my gaze. "You always do." "No," I wanted to scream. "I don't always figure it out. I'm tired, I'm scared, and I have nowhere to go. But pride is a stubborn thing, and sometimes it's all a man has left." So I just nodded and walked toward the front door. The frigid November air cut through my thin jacket as I loaded my life into the bed of my 19-year-old pickup. The engine protested with a cough and a sputter before finally catching. I just sat there for a long moment, looking back at the house I'd helped Kevin secure the down payment for, the house where I dreamed of one day playing with grandchildren I now knew I'd never have. Through the front window, I could see Kevin and Brenda watching me. They didn't look sad or conflicted. They looked relieved. I shifted the truck into drive and pulled away from the curb. In my rearview mirror, I saw them shut the door, and then the porch light blinked off, plunging the house into darkness. The symbolism was not lost on me. The roads were quiet as I drove without a destination, passing through neighborhoods adorned with the warm, golden glow of holiday decorations. Families were gathering, sharing meals, grateful for one another. I had always imagined Kevin and I would have countless more Thanksgivings, that I'd pass down my family's stories to his children. Instead, I was adrift in the cold dark, with everything I owned rattling in the back of a truck that was on its last legs. I found a 24-hour diner on the edge of town and ordered a coffee I couldn't really afford. The waitress, a woman around my age with tired lines around her eyes but a kind smile, didn't pry. She just kept my mug full and let me be. My phone sat on the table, dark and silent. Kevin had my number, but I knew it wouldn't ring. As I sat there stirring my coffee, I tried to pinpoint where it all went wrong. Was I too much of a burden? Had I missed the signs that my presence was resented? Or had my son simply become a man I no longer knew, molded by a woman who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle? In the end, it didn't matter. All that mattered was what happened next. And for the first time in my adult life, I had no answer. The diner's warmth did nothing to chase away the chill that had settled deep in my bones. I was alone in a way I'd never been before. Even after Kevin's mother left, I'd had a purpose, to raise my son, to show him what it meant to be a decent man. Now, it felt like all of it had been for nothing. I paid for the coffee and went back to my truck. The engine turned over on the fourth try. I pulled back onto the deserted highway, driving nowhere in particular, carrying the weight of a lifetime of love that apparently was not enough. I had been on the road for about 3 hours when I saw the flashing lights. The snow had started as a light dusting around midnight, but by 2 a.m. it was a full-blown storm, making the roads treacherous. I was somewhere on I-70, west of Indianapolis, my truck's heater fighting a losing battle against the frost on the windshield when a pair of hazard lights cut through the swirling snow. A family was huddled beside a sleek, dark SUV on the shoulder. Steam billowed from under the hood, and I could see the man trying to flag down passing cars, his gestures growing more desperate as each vehicle sped past, indifferent. Behind him, a woman was in the driver's seat with what looked like 2 small children in the back. My first instinct was to keep going. I had my own crisis to deal with. I was homeless, my bank account was nearly empty, and my truck felt like it could give out at any second. The last thing I needed was to get entangled in someone else's problems. But I couldn't do it. Maybe it was the defeated slump of the man's shoulders as another car ignored him. Maybe it was the thought of those kids getting colder by the minute. Or maybe it was just that I knew exactly how it felt to be left behind, to be invisible when you desperately needed someone to see you. I pulled over, my own hazard lights joining the frantic blinking in the snowy darkness. The man approached my truck cautiously as I stepped out. He was younger than Kevin, probably in his mid-30s, with dark hair and intelligent eyes that held a mixture of relief and exhaustion. A smart man being careful on a dark highway. "Thank you for stopping," he said, his breath pluming in the icy air. "I'm Julian. That's my wife, Clara, and our daughters in the car." "Arthur," I replied, shaking his offered hand. His grip was strong, a working man's grip. "What seems to be the trouble?" "Radiator, I think. It started overheating about 20 miles back, and now it won't turn over at all," he explained, gesturing helplessly at the SUV. I called for a tow, but with this weather, they said it could be 4 hours, maybe more. I walked over and took a look under the hood. The engine was still ticking, and the sickly sweet smell of coolant hung in the air. A busted hose, most likely. 4 hours in this cold with 2 little girls was not just an inconvenience, it was dangerous. "Where are you headed?" I asked. "Home, just north of here, in Carmel." He ran a hand through his snow-dusted hair. "I know this is a huge ask, but could you possibly tow us? I'll pay you whatever you think is fair." I looked at his face, illuminated by the flashing lights. There was a sincerity there that reminded me of myself at that age, back when Kevin was little and every problem felt like the end of the world. This man was just trying to get his family home safe. I don't have a professional tow rig, I said. Just some heavy-duty straps in the back. It's not ideal, but if you're willing to take a chance... Relief washed over his face. Yes, absolutely. How much do I owe you? I thought about my bank account, the $86 in my wallet, and the terrifying uncertainty of where I would sleep. A tow like this could net me a couple $100, easy. Don't worry about it, I heard myself say. Julian blinked. I'm sorry? No charge, I repeated, already walking back to my truck to grab the straps. Let's just get your family home. He stared at me as if I'd grown a second head. Sir, I can't let you do that for free. You're already going so far out of your way. I said, don't worry about it, I insisted. Now help me get this thing hooked up. It took us nearly 20 minutes to get the SUV secured. The vehicle was heavy and my old truck grumbled in protest, but the straps were solid. Julian insisted on staying in the SUV to steer, while Clara and their two little girls, twins, maybe 7 or 8 years old, climbed into the cab of my truck. Clara was visibly pregnant, maybe 6 or 7 months along, and she settled the girls between us with gentle care. They were beautiful kids, with their father's dark eyes and a quiet composure that was impressive given the circumstances. I'm Clara, she said as I carefully pulled back onto the highway, and these are Maya and Lily. Girls, say thank you to Mr. Arthur, I supplied, and there's no need for thanks. Yes, there is, Clara said firmly. You have no idea how much this means to us. I focused on the road, keeping my speed low and steady. The weight of the SUV made every turn a delicate maneuver, especially with the snow coming down even harder now, but the old truck was holding its own. Are you from around here? Clara asked. Originally from Michigan, I said, but I've been in this area for a while. It wasn't exactly a lie. A day ago, I lived with Kevin. Now, I lived in my truck. What about you? You mentioned Carmel. We have a place just outside of town. Julian grew up there, and we moved back about 5 years ago when his business really took off. She paused. He's in private equity, mostly tech investments. I nodded, concentrating on a slick patch of road. Maya, the girl nestled against my right side, had already fallen asleep. Lily was trying to fight it, her head bobbing. This is so kind of you, Clara continued, her voice soft. Especially on Thanksgiving night. Don't you have family you need to get to? The question landed like a punch to the gut. I kept my eyes on the road, my voice steady. Not tonight. She must have heard the finality in my tone because she didn't press. We drove in a comfortable quiet for a while, the only sounds being the groan of the engine, the wipers fighting the snow, and the soft breathing of the sleeping girls. About 40 minutes later, Lily stirred and looked up at me with sleepy eyes. Are you a grandpa? She asked, with the blunt honesty only a child possesses. Lily, Clara whispered, that's not a polite question. It's all right, I said, though my chest tightened. No, sweetheart, I'm not a grandpa. Do you want to be one? She asked. The innocent question nearly broke me. Here was a child I'd just met, asking me something I had dreamed of for years, but was starting to accept would never happen. Maybe someday, I managed to say. Lily nodded seriously and leaned her head back against my arm, asleep within minutes. Clara watched the exchange with a thoughtful expression. You're very good with children, she observed. I raised my son on my own for most of his life, I said. You learn a thing or two. That must have been hard. It was worth it. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. Julian's GPS, which Clara was holding, showed we were getting close. I could see the distant glow of city lights through the snow, and my heart sank. This strange, peaceful interlude was ending. Soon I would be alone again, back on the highway to nowhere. But as we turned off the main road and onto a winding private lane, I started to realize that Julian and Clara's place might not be what I had imagined. My headlights swept across pristine lawns, a wrought iron gate, and a driveway that seemed to disappear into the snowy darkness. Whatever Julian did in private equity, he was clearly very, very good at it. And at that moment, I had a feeling this night was about to get a lot more complicated. The structure that emerged from the snow-swept darkness at the end of the long, winding driveway wasn't a house. It was an estate, 3 stories of modern glass and stone rose before us, with warm light pouring from what seemed like 100 windows. Even through the snow, I could see professionally landscaped gardens and a large covered fountain. The detached garage alone was probably bigger than the house I'd helped my son buy. I sat there in stunned silence as Julian guided me to a stop near the grand front entrance. This wasn't just success. This was a level of wealth I had only ever seen in movies. Clara seemed to sense my astonishment and gave me a small, apologetic smile. "I know it's a bit much," she said quietly, careful not to wake the girls. Julian worked incredibly hard to get here. Before we could even get out of the truck, the massive front door swung open, and a woman in her 50s, with greying hair and kind eyes, hurried out into the snow, pulling a thick robe around her pajamas. "Thank goodness you're safe," she called out, rushing to help Clara down from the truck. When Julian called and said the car broke down, I was beside myself with worry. "We're fine, Rosa," Clara assured her. "This is Arthur. He towed us all the way home." Rosa turned to me, her eyes filled with genuine tears. "Bless you," she said simply. "Bless you for bringing them home." Julian was already unhooking the tow straps, and I moved to help him, grateful to have something to do. The sheer scale of the place, the house, the grounds, the palpable wealth, was making me feel smaller and more out of place with every passing second. "Arthur," Julian said as we coiled the straps, "I can't thank you enough. Please, you must come inside. You'll freeze to death out here." "I should get going," I mumbled, even though the thought of climbing back into my freezing truck made my bones ache. "You've got your family to see to." "Absolutely not," Clara said firmly, having overheard us. "It's nearly 4 a.m. You've been driving through a blizzard and you just rescued us. The very least we can do is offer you a hot drink and a warm place to rest for a bit." I wanted to say no. Everything about this place screamed that I didn't belong. But then the twins began to stir, looking around with sleepy confusion. Lily spotted me, and her face broke into a smile. "Arthur," she said, suddenly wide awake, "are you coming inside?" And just like that, all my resistance evaporated. The inside of the house was even more breathtaking than the outside. Polished marble floors gleamed under modern light fixtures, and a dramatic floating staircase spiraled up to the second floor. The walls were adorned with what looked like original modern art, and thick plush rugs that probably cost more than my truck were scattered across the floors. Rosa, who I gathered was their live-in housekeeper and nanny, was already bustling around, making hot chocolate for the girls and coffee for the adults. The twins were now fully awake and chattering about their big adventure, treating me like some kind of folk hero for the truck ride. "Girls, go with Rosa and get into your pajamas," Clara said gently. "It's way past your bedtime." "But we want to stay with Arthur," Maya protested. "Arthur will still be here in the morning," Julian said. Then he looked at me with a questioning glance. "Won't you? I mean, I really hope you'll stay the night. It's far too late, and the storm is too bad for you to be driving." I opened my mouth to politely decline, but the words wouldn't come. Where would I even go? Back to the diner? A rest stop parking lot? The truth was, I had nowhere else on earth to be. "If it's no trouble," I said quietly. "No trouble at all," Clara said warmly. "We have more than enough room." As Rosa led the girls upstairs, Julian gestured for me to follow him into what looked like a library. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves flanked a massive fireplace where a fire was already crackling. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid that smelled expensive and handed one to me. "To good Samaritans," he said, raising his glass. We drank in silence for a moment, the whiskey spreading a welcome warmth through my chest. Finally, Julian spoke. "Can I ask you something, Arthur?" I nodded. "Why did you stop for us, and why wouldn't you let me pay you?" I stared into the flames, thinking about how to answer. "Because I know what it's like to be stranded," I said at last, "to need a helping hand and watch people drive right on by." Julian studied my face intently. "That sounds like you're speaking from experience. Less than 24 hours ago, my son threw me out of his house," I heard myself say. The whiskey had certainly loosened my tongue, but there was also something about Julian that made me feel safe, that invited honesty, told me I was a burden, gave me an hour to pack and leave. Julian's expression hardened. Your own son? His wife has been working on him for months. I lost my job back in the spring. Couldn't find another one. They let me stay with them, but I shrugged, the motion feeling heavy and tired. I guess there's a limit to charity, even when it's family. How old are you? 61. Julian was quiet for a long time. Then he did something unexpected. He walked over to a bookshelf and picked up a silver-framed photograph. He looked at it for a few seconds before bringing it over to me. The photo showed a man who looked a lot like Julian, but older, with grease under his fingernails. He was standing with a proud grin next to a young boy, clearly Julian as a kid, in front of an old garage. "That's my father," Julian said quietly. His name was Robert. I looked closer at the photo. The resemblance was uncanny, but there was something in the older man's tired but proud eyes that felt deeply familiar. "He passed away 10 years ago," Julian continued. "Sudden heart attack. He was a mechanic his whole life, worked himself to the bone for us, just like you did in construction. I'm sorry for your loss." Julian sat down across from me, his eyes fixed on the photo. "The thing is, Arthur, I never got the chance to tell him I was sorry." "Sorry for what?" Julian's jaw tightened. "When I was 17, we had a terrible fight. I was an arrogant kid, thought I knew everything. I said some horrible things to him, told him I hated him, that I couldn't wait to get away from him and his greasy garage." He paused, his thumb tracing the edge of the silver frame. "My mother told me I was being ungrateful, that I needed to go back and apologize, but I was too proud, too stubborn. I moved in with a buddy, got a job, and eventually put myself through business school. I spent the next decade trying to prove I didn't need him, that I could be successful on my own terms. But you did it," I said, gesturing around the magnificent room. "Look at all this." "Yeah, I did," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And you know the worst part, he was proud of me the whole time. My mother would call and tell me how he'd brag to his customers about me, said he used to drive by my first office building sometimes just to look at it." The pain in Julian's voice was palpable. I had a feeling I knew where this was going. By the time I was ready to swallow my pride and go see him, it was too late. He had a massive heart attack at the garage, gone just like that. I never got to say I was sorry. I never got to thank him. Julian looked up at me, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I've carried that regret with me every single day for 10 years. The knowledge that my stupid pride cost me years with a man who loved me unconditionally." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "Julian, why are you telling me all this?" He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Because when I saw you tonight, standing in that snowstorm, helping my family for no reason other than it was the right thing to do, you reminded me so much of him. And then when you told me about your son, what he did." Julian shook his head. "I feel like I'm looking at a second chance." "A second chance for what?" Julian stood and walked back to the fireplace. "Arthur, I want to make you an offer, but I need you to hear the whole thing before you answer." My heart began to pound in my chest. "What kind of offer? I want you to stay here, not just for the night. I mean, I want you to live here, to be a part of our family." Julian turned to face me. "Clara and I have tried to give our girls a stable, loving childhood, but both our parents are gone. We have no other family. The girls, they've never known what it's like to have a grandfather." I just stared at him, speechless. "Julian, you don't even know me." "I know enough," he said firmly. "I know you're a man who stops for strangers in a blizzard. I know you wouldn't take a dime from a man trying to get his pregnant wife and kids home. I know you raised a son by yourself and did your damnedest to be a good father, even if that son is too blind to see it." The room was starting to feel unsteady, and I wasn't sure if it was the whiskey or the sheer insanity of what Julian was proposing. "You're talking about charity," I said, my voice hoarse. "I can't be a charity case. This isn't charity, Arthur. This is about family. It's about me getting a chance to honor my father in a way I never could. It's about you getting the family you deserve. Clara and I have more money than we'll ever need, but we can't buy the things that truly matter. We can't buy wisdom or experience or the kind of unconditional love a grandfather provides. I stood up abruptly, the whiskey glass trembling in my hand. This was too much, too fast. It felt like a dream. I need some air, I stammered. Julian nodded, his expression understanding. The guest room is upstairs, second door on the right. Just think about it, Arthur. Please, think about what it could mean for all of us. As I climbed that incredible floating staircase to a guest room larger and more luxurious than any place I had ever called home, I couldn't shake the feeling that my entire life had just veered onto a path I never could have predicted. I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay in a bed that felt as big as my entire old apartment, staring at the high ceiling and trying to process Julian's staggering offer. The guest room was a study in quiet luxury, with everything perfectly chosen and impeccably crafted. Through the massive window, I could see the snow had finally stopped falling, blanketing the vast grounds in a pristine white sheet. Down the hall, a family slept, and I was the stranger who had inexplicably crashed into their perfect world. A soft knock at the door startled me. "Come in," I called out, assuming it was Julian, but it was Clara who entered, carrying a steaming mug. She wore a silk robe over her pajamas, her pregnant belly a gentle curve beneath the fabric. "I brought you some tea," she said, her voice a soft murmur as she placed the mug on the bedside table. "Chamomile. It's supposed to help you relax." "Thank you," I said, sitting up and pulling the duvet around my waist. "You really didn't have to do that." Clara eased herself into an armchair by the bed with a small sigh. "Julian told me about your conversation," she said directly, getting straight to the point, "about his offer." I felt a flush of embarrassment creep up my neck. I hope he didn't overstep. "I know this is your home, your family. You should have the final say." "You're right, I should," Clara said, and a knowing smile touched her lips. "That's why I'm here." She was quiet for a moment, her hands resting protectively on her belly. "Arthur, can I tell you something about my husband? Something he probably didn't share because he's too proud." I nodded, intrigued. 5 years ago, when we first moved into this house, Julian wasn't just successful, he was empty. He had the business, the money, all the trappings, but he was completely haunted by what happened with his father. He buried himself in work, trying to prove something to a man who was already gone. Clara shifted in her seat, wincing slightly. I barely saw him. The girls barely saw him. He was a ghost in his own home, and I was terrified I was going to lose him to his own regret. "What changed?" I asked. 2 years ago, Maya and Lily's school had a Grandparents' Day celebration. All the other kids had their grandfathers there, reading them stories, helping with crafts, just being there. Our girls sat all by themselves, and I watched Julian's heart break in real time. That night, she said, her voice catching, he cried for the first time since I'd known him. He told me he finally understood what he'd truly lost. Not just his father, but the chance to be the kind of loving, present father his own dad had tried to be. He promised me he would break the cycle, that he would make sure our children never felt the kind of abandonment he'd carried his whole life. "It sounds like he's been a good dad since then," I observed. "He has," she confirmed. "But you have to understand, Arthur, Julian sees patterns. It's what makes him a genius in his field. And when he met you tonight, when he heard your story, he didn't just see a man in need. He saw a chance to heal something that's been broken in both of you." I took a sip of the tea. It was perfect. "Clara, I appreciate everything you're saying, but this is all happening so fast. You don't know the first thing about me. For all you know, I could be dangerous, a con man." Clara let out a soft, warm laugh. "Do you really think we're that naive, Arthur? Do you think Julian built this life by being a poor judge of character? I don't understand. While you and Julian were talking, I made a few phone calls. I spoke with your old supervisor at the construction company, a Mr. Peterson, a very nice man." My heart nearly stopped. "You investigated me. I did my due diligence," she said unapologetically. "Mr. Peterson told me you were the most dependable employee he'd had in 30 years. Never missed a shift, always stayed late to help a client. He said letting you go was one of the hardest things he'd ever had to do." Clara leaned forward, her expression serious. "He also told me about the time you used your own money to buy materials and fix an elderly woman's porch railing because she couldn't afford it. and how you mentored all the young guys on your crew. I felt completely exposed, like she could see right through me. Those were just small things. Small things build a man's character, Clara stated firmly. I also spoke with the manager of the apartment complex where you lived before you moved in with your son. A Mrs. Gable? She said you were the best tenant she ever had, always paid your rent a week early, always helped the other residents with repairs, shoveled the walkways for the seniors. The room felt suddenly very warm. Why are you telling me all this? Because I want you to understand that this isn't some whim. Julian and I were up for 2 hours after you came upstairs. We've been looking for someone like you for years without even knowing it. Clara stood up slowly, one hand on the small of her back. Arthur, we're about to have our third child. Maya and Lily are at an age where they crave stability and guidance. And Julian, he needs to give the love he was never able to give his own father. What about what I need? I asked, the words coming out quieter than I intended. Clara smiled, a brilliant, radiant smile. What do you need, Arthur? The question hit me with the force of a physical blow. What did I need? For months, I'd only been thinking about what I'd lost. My job, my home, my son's love. I'd been stuck in survival mode. I need to matter, I heard myself say, the truth of it raw and undeniable. I need to feel like my life still has a purpose. And what would give you that purpose? I thought about the twins, how they'd fallen asleep against me in the truck. I thought about Lily asking if I wanted to be a grandpa. I thought about Julian's pain and Clara's quiet strength. Being needed, I said finally, not as a project, but as part of a family. Clara moved to the window and looked out at the snow. Julian has a trust fund for each of the girls, for college and whatever else they need. But all the money in the world can't teach them what you can. It can't teach them about resilience or hard work, or give them the unconditional love of a grandfather. She turned back to me. We're not offering you charity, Arthur. We're offering you a position, a chance to be the grandfather our children deserve, and the father figure Julian so desperately needs to heal. And what's in it for you? I asked. Her smile was full of warmth, peace of mind, knowing that when this baby arrives, I'll have an extra set of capable hands from someone who has actually raised a child, knowing that my husband won't be carrying the weight of his regret alone anymore, and knowing that my children will grow up understanding what family truly means. A comfortable silence fell between us. Outside, the first faint hint of dawn was colouring the eastern sky. There's one more thing, Clara said softly. Something Julian didn't mention because he didn't want it to influence your decision. What's that? His business partner is looking for a new property manager for their commercial portfolio. It's not glamorous, overseeing repairs, dealing with tenants, but it's a steady job with a good salary and full benefits. It would give you your own financial independence. My throat felt tight. Why would he do that? Because family takes care of each other, she said simply. And because a man needs to feel useful. He needs to contribute. Julian understands that. Clara walked toward the door, then paused. Arthur, I want you to know, if you decide this isn't for you, we will completely understand. Julian will still help you get an apartment, help you get back on your feet, no strings attached, but if you stay... Her voice trailed off and I saw tears welling in her eyes. If you stay, you'll be giving this family the one thing we didn't even know we were missing. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find that the home you thought you'd lost was just waiting for you somewhere else. After she left, I sat in that chair and watched the sunrise. In a few hours, the twins would wake up and come looking for me. Julian would be in the kitchen making pancakes. For the first time in months, I could picture a future that didn't involve sleeping in my truck. I could see myself helping Maya with her history project, teaching Lily how to tie a proper knot, holding Clara's new baby. But more than anything, I could see myself mattering again. The decision, I realized, had already been made the moment I pulled over on that snowy highway. All I had to do now was find the courage to accept what they were offering. Not just a home, but a family that actually wanted me. I had been living with Julian and Clara's family for 2 months when Kevin found me. 2 months of morning coffee with Julian, of helping Maya with her multiplication tables, of teaching Lily how to build a birdhouse. 2 months of feeling the rust of uselessness fall away, of waking up with a sense of purpose instead of a sense of dread. The property manager job had materialized exactly as Clara had described, and it was perfect. I was overseeing a couple of office buildings and a small retail center, work that kept my mind sharp and my hands busy. I was paying my own way, contributing, and it felt incredible. I was in the lobby of one of the office buildings, replacing a faulty ballast in a light fixture when my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but something told me to answer. "Dad?" My heart seized. It was Kevin's voice, but it sounded small and uncertain, a way I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. "Kevin." I set my tools down and stepped outside into the cold. "How did you get this number?" It wasn't easy. I had to call around. Mr. Peterson at the old company finally gave it to me. I waited in silence. "Dad, we need to talk." "We had our talk 2 months ago," I said, my voice level. "I thought you made your position perfectly clear." "Please," he said, and now there was a clear note of desperation. "Can I come see you? I know you're somewhere near Carmel. I can drive up this weekend." Every fibre of my being wanted to hang up, but this was still my son. And despite everything, I couldn't extinguish the faint flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, he understood the gravity of what he had done. "Why now, Kevin?" There was a long pause on the other end. "Because I miss you," he said quietly. "Because Brenda and we think we might have been too harsh." I closed my eyes. I knew it wasn't the truth. What happened? Nothing happened. We want to make it right. It was a lie. I could hear it in his voice, the same way I could when he was 15 and trying to talk his way out of being grounded. But against my better judgment, I found myself saying, "I'll text you the address. Come Sunday afternoon." I spent the next few days in a state of quiet anxiety. Julian and Clara could tell something was wrong, though I'd only told them my son had called. The twins, however, were ecstatic. "Is he nice like you, Grandpa Art?" Maya asked at breakfast on Saturday. The girls had started calling me that a few weeks in, and I had long since stopped correcting them. "He's complicated, sweetheart," was the best I could offer. Sunday arrived, overcast and cold. I was pacing the grand living room when Kevin's car finally pulled up the long driveway. Through the window, I saw him get out and stare up at the house, his jaw slack with amazement. Brenda got out of the passenger side, her expression a mixture of shock and calculation as her eyes scanned the estate. Her coming along told me everything I needed to know about the real reason for this visit. Julian answered the door, and I could hear the forced friendliness in Kevin's voice as he introduced himself. Brenda's laugh was sharp and artificial. "Dad," Kevin said, entering the living room with his arms wide as if expecting a hug. I didn't move from my spot by the fireplace. "Kevin, Brenda." His arms dropped awkwardly to his sides. Brenda hung back, her eyes cataloguing every piece of expensive art and furniture. "Wow, Dad. This is some place," Kevin said, trying to break the heavy silence. "Your friend here must be doing all right for himself." "Julian and Clara have been very kind," I said. "I'll bet they have," Kevin replied, and I could hear the first hint of an edge in his voice. "Must be nice, falling into something like this." Julian appeared in the doorway. "Arthur, would you and your family like some privacy?" "Stay," I said firmly. "Kevin, Brenda, this is Julian Chen. Julian, this is my son Kevin and his wife Brenda." Julian shook their hands, his expression polite but his eyes sharp, assessing them with the same shrewdness that had built his fortune. "What a beautiful home," Brenda gushed. "You must have worked so hard for all of this." "We've been very fortunate," Julian replied smoothly. Kevin cleared his throat. "Dad, can we talk? Alone?" I glanced at Julian, who gave a slight nod and stepped back into the hallway, though I noticed he didn't go far. "So," Kevin began once he thought we were alone, "this is what you've been doing? Living it up in a palace while your own family was worried sick about you?" "My family?" I asked quietly. 2 months ago, you made it very clear I wasn't part of your family. Brenda stepped forward, her expression shifting to one of placating concern. Arthur, we were all upset that night. Things were said. You can't honestly believe we meant any of it. Which part didn't you mean? I challenged. The part where I was a freeloader, a burden. The part where you needed me out of your house. Kevin at least had the decency to look away, but only for a moment. We were under a lot of stress. My hours got cut at work. The mortgage payment went up. Your hours were cut. The company downsized. I'm only working part-time now, he mumbled. We're behind on the mortgage. The bank is talking about foreclosure. And there it was. The real reason. I see, I said. And you came here thinking, what? That I'd ask my wealthy friends for a handout. Not a handout, Brenda said quickly. We just figured, you could put in a good word. You want me to ask Julian for money? Not for us, Kevin said unbelievably. For you. I mean, you're living here. You must have some pull. He'd want to help out his friend's family, right? I just stared at my son, this man I had tried so hard to raise with integrity. Kevin, do you even hear yourself? I hear a son who's trying to save his home. He shot back. I hear a man willing to swallow his pride for the people he loves. The people you love? A hot, righteous anger began to build in my chest. You don't kick out the people you love on a cold night. You don't tell the people you love that they're worthless burdens. We made a mistake, okay? Kevin's voice rose. We're here now. We want you to come home. This is my home now. Brenda let out a short, bitter laugh. Oh, please. This isn't your home, Arthur. You're their pet project, a charity case. Do you really think these people see you as family? Before I could answer, a small voice piped up from the grand staircase. Grandpa Art, is everything okay? Kevin and Brenda spun around. I saw Kevin's face drain of colour as he processed what the little girl had just called me. Maya stood there in the doorway, her hair in pigtails, with Lily right behind her, clutching a drawing. We made you a picture, Lily announced, holding up a piece of paper. It showed a group of stick figures in front of a big house. Julian, Clara, the twins, and right in the middle, a grey-haired figure with Grandpa Art written above it. The silence in the room was absolute. Girls, I said gently, this is Kevin and Brenda. Can you give us just a few more minutes? Maya looked at Kevin with a child's unfiltered scrutiny. You don't look like Grandpa Art, she declared. I'm his son, Kevin said stiffly. Oh, Maya's face brightened. Then you're our uncle. Are you going to live here too? We have lots of extra rooms. I saw the muscle in Kevin's jaw jump. Number. We have our own home. For now, Brenda muttered under her breath. Clara appeared, drawn by the commotion. Girls, why don't you go show Daddy your picture? He's in his office. After the children scurried off, Clara looked at the three of us, the tension in the room so thick you could taste it. I should let you finish your conversation, she said. Actually, I said, my voice steady and clear, I think we're done here. Kevin's face flushed with anger. Dad, you can't be serious. You're choosing these strangers over your own flesh and blood. These strangers, I said quietly, never made me feel worthless. These strangers never made me wonder where I would sleep at night. These strangers see me as family, not as an inconvenience to be discarded. We said we were sorry. No, Kevin. You said you made a mistake. There's a difference. Brenda's mask of civility finally shattered. Fine. You want to play house with your rich friends. Go ahead. But don't you dare come crawling back to us when they get tired of their little charity project. I won't, I said simply. Kevin stared at me, and in that long, hard moment, I saw the last flicker of our shared history die in his eyes. You know what, Dad? Maybe we were right the first time. Maybe you really are just a selfish old man who thinks the world owes him something. Every word was a carefully aimed dart. 2 months ago, they would have crippled me. But now, with Clara standing protectively in the doorway and the sound of the girls' laughter echoing from down the hall, his words felt hollow and weak. Maybe I am, I said, but I'd rather be a selfish old man who is loved than a bitter young man who threw away the only person who ever truly was. Kevin's hands balled into fists. For a second, I thought he might actually swing at me. Instead, he spun on his heel and stormed toward the door. Don't ever contact us again, he spat over his shoulder. I won't, I replied. As their car sped down the driveway, Clara came and stood beside me. Are you all right? She asked softly. I watched until the car disappeared, taking my son out of my life for good. I felt a mix of things: sadness, regret, a strange sense of relief. But for the first time since that terrible night, I didn't feel lost. Yeah, I said, surprised to realize it was the absolute truth. I think I am. 2 years later, I am standing in the sun-drenched nursery that Clara and I designed together, rocking my 3-month-old grandson, Leo, as he sleeps against my chest. Outside the window, I can see Maya and Lily, now 9, building a snowman in the yard, their laughter echoing in the crisp winter air. They call me Grandpa Art without a second thought, and I've stopped thinking of myself as anything else. Blood doesn't make a family, love does. And this house is overflowing with it. Julian appears in the doorway, a deep, satisfied contentment now his default expression. Having a father figure in his life has healed a wound in him I don't think he ever knew how to name. How's the little guy doing? He asks, his voice a low whisper as he nods toward the baby. Perfect, I say, adjusting the blanket around Leo's small frame. Sleeping like a champ. Good. Clara's finally taking a nap. The doctor said she needs to rest. Julian comes to stand beside me at the window. We watch the girls in comfortable silence. This, I've learned, is what peace feels like. Not a frantic, fleeting happiness, but a deep, steady contentment that comes from being exactly where you belong. Art, Julian says suddenly, his tone shifting. I need to talk to you about something. He seems nervous, but also excited. What is it? Clara and I have been talking, and we want to make some things official, legally. He turns to face me. We want to adopt you. I blink, certain I've misheard. I'm sorry. Adult adoption. It's a real thing. You'd legally be our father. The girls would officially be your granddaughters. Leo, your grandson. The baby stirs in my arms, and I look down at his perfect sleeping face as I try to wrap my head around what Julian just said. Why? I ask finally. Because family should be official, Clara's voice says from the doorway. She's in her robe, hair messy from her nap, but she's beaming, because we want there to be no question, ever, about where you belong. And more than that, Julian adds, we want you to be our heir. We've been meeting with our lawyers. When we're gone, everything goes to you first, then to the children. We want you to be the patriarch of this family, officially and legally. I sink down into the rocking chair by the crib, still holding Leo, my mind reeling. You don't have to do any of that, I say quietly. I already feel like family. We know, Clara says, perching on the arm of the chair, but we want it in writing. And Art? Her voice gets thick with emotion. We want to take your name. What? The Miller family, Julian says with a grin, using my last name. Has a nice ring to it, don't you think? I stare at them, these two incredible people who rescued me from the lowest point of my life and gave me back my identity. I don't know what to say. Say yes! Maya shouts from the doorway. She and Lily are standing there, red-cheeked and covered in snow. We already decided what to call you at the ceremony. What ceremony? The family ceremony, Lily explains, as if it's the most obvious thing in the world. When you're our legal grandpa, we're going to call you Patriarch Arthur. I let out a laugh that's halfway to a sob. Patriarch Arthur. It's very distinguished, Maya says, with great seriousness. Clara gently takes Leo from my arms. The girls have been in on this for months, she admits. They helped us plan the whole thing. You've been planning this for months. Ever since Kevin's visit, Julian confirms. That day, seeing how you chose us, how you chose love over blood, Clara and I knew we had to make this permanent, to make sure you never ever doubted your place. I think about Kevin sometimes, wonder if he and Brenda saved their house. I heard through the grapevine that they didn't. They lost it about 6 months after that day. A part of me feels a distant sadness for him, but it's the sadness you'd feel for a stranger. He made his choice, and I made mine. There's one more surprise, Clara says, her eyes twinkling. What now? I ask, not sure how much more my heart can take. Julian hands me a legal document. I read the header and then read it again. A deed? A name change? I look up at them, confused. Not your name. Our name, Clara clarifies. Julian Miller, Clara Miller, Maya and Lily Miller, Leo Miller. One family, one name. Tears are streaming down my face now, and I don't bother to wipe them away. Your family name is Chen. My family legacy is what I choose to make it, Julian says firmly. And I choose to make it about the man who taught me what a father really is. Can we tell him about the other surprise? Lily bounces on her toes. What other surprise? I ask. Maya runs to the window. Look! I stand and look outside. Parked in the driveway, next to Julian's Tesla and Clara's SUV, is a brand new gleaming silver pickup truck with a giant red bow on the hood. Happy Gotcha Day, Grandpa Art! The girls shout in unison. Gotcha Day? The day we got you, Maya explains. 2 years ago tomorrow, when you towed us home. We figured you needed a proper truck for all your projects, Clara says with a laugh. The keys are on the kitchen counter, Julian says. Want to take her for a spin? Can we come? Asks Lily. Absolutely, I say. Then I pause. But first, I need to say something. The room goes quiet. 2 years ago, I thought my life was over. I was useless, a failure, and I thought I would never matter to anyone again. I look at each of them. You saved me. Not just from being homeless and alone. You saved me from disappearing. You gave me back my purpose, my family. I take a deep breath. I've learned that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who stays, who sees the value in you when you can't see it in yourself. I look at Julian. You saw something in a broken-down old man on the side of the road. I turn to Clara. You trusted me with your children and made me feel needed. Finally, I kneel down to the girls. And you two, you showed me what unconditional love feels like. Maya throws her arms around my neck. So is that a yes to the adoption? I hug her tight and pull Lily in too. That's a yes to everything. The adoption, the name change, all of it. Even Patriarch Arthur, Lily asks. Especially Patriarch Arthur. The next hour is a happy blur. We all pile into the new truck, the girls squeezed between us, all of us talking at once as we drive through the Indiana countryside. I think about that night 2 years ago when I pulled over to help a family in the snow. I thought I was just doing a good deed. I had no idea I was driving straight toward the life I was always meant to have. We stop at a diner for milkshakes. I watch Julian help the girls out of the truck and Clara adjust the baby's blanket, and we move together as if we've been a family forever. Because we have been. We are a chosen family. A real family. Later that evening, after the kids are in bed, I sit on the back porch, looking out over the property I now call home. My phone is on the table beside me. That chapter is closed. I learned that you can't force people to love you, but you can open your heart to the people who see your worth, who choose you, and if you're lucky, they become your family. The door opens, and Julian comes out with 2 mugs of coffee. Thought you might be cold, he says. Just thinking, I reply, about how strange life is. 2 years ago, if someone told me I'd be here, I'd have said they were crazy. Me too, Julian says. If someone had told me that stopping on a highway would heal a part of me I thought was broken forever, I'd never have believed them. We sit in comfortable silence, father and son, watching the stars come out. Julian, I say after a while, thank you. For what? For seeing me, for choosing me. Julian claps me on the shoulder. Thank you for stopping that night, Art. Thank you for being the father I needed and the grandfather my children deserve. Inside, I can hear Clara humming a lullaby to Leo. Tomorrow, there will be pancakes and school projects and doctor's appointments. Small, ordinary moments that make up a life. They're precious because they are shared. Julian's phone buzzes. It's a text from the lawyer. He shows me the screen. Everything is set. Court date is January 15th. Congratulations to the Miller family. The Miller family. In 3 weeks, it will be official. But sitting here tonight, surrounded by the warmth of the people who chose me, I know it has been true for a long, long time. I'm home. Finally, completely and permanently home. Now I'm curious about you who listen to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favourites. and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here. End of story.